This week's lecture series will consist of focus on two-dimensional elements. This is a part of two weeks of lecture. We will start this week particularly with triangular elements. Of course, the theory of a plate in general or a 2D part is going to remain the same whether we choose for triangular elements or rectangular elements. But there is a significant difference in the way these elements are set up and the assumptions we need to make right at the beginning. And there are some very special observations that you will see based on the kind of element that we are going to study. So this week we will focus our attention on triangular two-dimensional elements. Triangular two-dimensional elements themselves can be of two different types. So for example, we know that any point, if there is any kind of a plate which is subjected to a certain kind of load, then we will have inside the plate at any point in the plate certain components of displacements. So if we are going to study the linear modeling theory, which of course will only deal with small deflections, that means we can decouple displacements and rotations from each other. It is possible to do that as long as we are going to stay within the small deflection domain. So if the in-plane and the out-of-plane, that is the transverse deflection and the in-plane deflections actually decouple from each other, then we can also calculate the stiffness matrices and so on for the element also in a decoupled fashion. That means if there is a plate which is only being acted upon by in-plane loads, then they are called membrane elements, which means that they will only undergo in-plane deformations. And on the other hand, if the plate is subjected to the action of a transverse load by means of bending moment, then any point inside this plate or this element can have a lateral or a transverse displacement. When there is a transverse displacement, then the in-plane displacements can also be experienced because of any of these bending rotations, for example, in the plate. That means this plate is going to be under bending, and therefore the element associated with it is called a bending element. This week we will concern ourselves by setting up the finite element formulations. For both these kinds of elements, we will not go until the end for the bending element, but for the membrane element, which is much simpler and can be easily written on a piece of paper, we will go up to the point of setting up the equilibrium equation by setting up its components. We will start with the displacement behavior, carry on more towards the strain energy formulation so that we can get the total potential energy of the system. So we know that from the strain energy, by doing a derivative, a partial derivative with respect to the displacements, we can get the stiffness matrix. Then the stiffness matrix, of course, is going to be local to a certain triangular element in a certain structure. We have to carry out a transformation with respect to a global coordinate system. And finally, by using the external work done, we can get the load vector for the system. So this is the route we will take for setting up the membrane element. However, for the bending element, we will only learn about the basics of the finite element formulation. There are some things that we will see as special observations and discoveries as we go along for the development of these elements, and that I will bring to your attention towards the last video.